r/nosleep. Posted by Reddit user pinkfever19. I stayed at the new luxury hotel with my best friend, but on our very first night over, I was given a strange set of rules that instructed me on how to stay alive. Part 3. I made it. I'm alive, but as crazy as this may sound, it was the devil himself that saved me. Well, sort of. Allow me to start from the beginning. According to the doctors, I was pronounced dead on the scene when paramedics arrived. I've been in the hospital now for over a week, asleep for most of it. But now that I have the energy, I can finally get back to you guys. With some effort, I did manage to fall asleep, but I somehow woke to the sound of my name being called. The voices were once again coming from the window, but they were much louder. Sometimes they were soft, curious even. They would call out to me in murmurs, no more than a whisper. Thankfully, the curtains were still closed from last night. The sobbing in the bathroom turned into agonizing moans. It was the voice of the woman crying over and over again. "It hurts, please. I need air, please." I broke down again, shedding tears that seemed to be endless, because it was all so much. It was just too much. I'm a bit of a crybaby, you see. I was never the brave one, according to my father, always reminding me that I was a woman now, and that I needed to face my fears head on if I wanted to go anywhere in life. Though, I don't think either of us would have ever predicted something like this would happen. So, I'd like to think he'd give me a pass this time for acting out. I think at some point I asked the voices to stop, to just go away and leave me alone. As if acting in defiance, they only got louder, and the sobbing in the bathroom turned to panic cries for help. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. The timer on my phone displayed 11 p.m. Yes, I neglected to shut it off again before falling to sleep. That was a poor mistake on my part. A voice called out from the hallway. "Room service for Miss Morris." He knocked again when I didn't respond. Louder, with more force. "Hello, Miss Morris? You did order room service, right?" "Yes," I answered shakily, thinking back to Rule 4. I forgot to mention that I went over the rules again before taking that long nap. I even folded them up and kept them in my pocket in case I needed them again. "What did you bring?" "The usual, miss." "Don't open the door. If he tells you anything else, tell him to leave it by the door." I kept my mouth shut, even holding my breath for the most part. After a minute or so, I thought he was gone, but he knocked again and continued calling out to me. "Hello? Is everything okay? Do you need me to come in? Miss Morris?" He knocked one more time, but a moment of silence followed before, "Please let me in." I hiccuped, as a strong urge came over me to actually open the door. He sounded desperate, helpless. He reminded me of a previous encounter I had with my young cousin. During a time he came over to visit us one year for Christmas, with my uncle and aunt. He had a nightmare his first night over, and came to my door begging to let him in, and to stay the night in the room. I felt sorry for the bellboy, or at least the thing behind my door. You can leave it by the door," I managed to say. After another beat of silence, I heard something being placed on the floor, followed by footsteps, leading itself away from the room. I waited some more before limping over to the entryway, taking the risk of looking through the door's small peephole. He was gone. The dish was heavy, and inside contained nothing but raw meat, and I'm certain it was all expired due to the wretched stench that came from it. I almost threw up as I scraped it into the trash bin. And yes, The smell, unfortunately, took up the entire room, making hell itself just a little bit more worse. I also disposed of the silver platter that it came from, covering the bin using Trina's bedsheet to try and mask the smell, which didn't really help at all, but it was better than nothing. The phone rang not long after I got back onto my bed, and she was screaming. The woman on the other line was screaming, and it was loud. I had to pull the phone away from my ear when she did so, and in shock, it even slipped out of my hands and onto the floor. Rule 21. The phone will ring for you, and you will once again hear the woman at the front desk. One of two things might happen. She will either give you instruction to follow like last time, or you will hear her scream bloody murder. If the latter happens, I'm sorry. It felt as if a stampede started making its way down the hall and towards my room, the screaming getting louder and more apparent along with it. I whimpered and practically dove myself back into the bed, where I left a little box, the gift the stranger left behind, the notes left for me in case of an emergency. I also forgot to tell you in my last update what it was. Sorry about that. Inside the box was a small gold coin. Along with it, a single sheet of paper, neatly folded up behind it. Inside the sheet was written, "Consume when necessary," in very blotchy letters. I don't even think they used ink to write it. My hands fumbled with the thing before I got it in my mouth, and the moment I swallowed, she finally burst through the room. The sight was absolutely maddening. Her jaw was dragging itself on the floor, all four limbs longer than her thinly clothed torso, perching the body off the floor as it crawled over to me with great speed. Its screams turned into an ear-piercing screech as the ground shook wildly, and then I woke up. I was in bed again, tucked in safely, as if nothing had happened. My body was covered in sweat, and a heavy gasp escaped me the moment I sat up. The voices behind the window had ceased, and the wailing in the bathroom had also seemed to disappear. The only thing that remained from before was the smell, and that time I actually did throw up because of it. Everything seemed to fall completely silent afterwards. It was unsettling how quiet it was. The only thing that could really be heard was my heavy breathing and my rapid heartbeat. And that woman, there was no trace of her whatsoever. It was as if she was never there. Her horrifying disfigurement, the screaming, it all still haunts my dreams, and will probably do so for a very long time. Whatever was in that box, it saved me. Or at least I think it did. It clearly did something nonetheless. I only had so much time to rest before I needed to follow the next rule. But at least it was enough to find my now useless temporary water bottle ice pack. I managed to take a couple of sips from it before heaving out whatever I ate before all this mess. Probably plain food. It helped just enough to clear my head, even easing some of the trembling from my sweaty palms. The bathroom light came on without warning, but this time there was no sound of a toilet flushing or the sink running. If the lights come on suddenly, you need to make your way into the bathroom, look in the mirror and tell your reflection, now's not the time, maybe later. If the lights go out again, you're fine. If they don't, ask your reflection, what time should we meet again? If your reflection responds, thank it, and only take your leave when the lights finally go out. My ankle throbbed as I limped over to the bathroom. It felt so much worse the longer I was on it, but through the pure adrenaline I still managed to get around well enough to do whatever needed to be done, at least during certain moments. The mirror never lies. That was made certain the moment I saw my own reflection. My hair was stringy. The mascara and foundation I had applied days ago streaky and absolutely horrid. I barely recognized myself, clearing my throat while also straightening myself out. I repeated the words written. "Now's not the time. Maybe later?" I was never the talker. Not to mention, someone who would talk to themselves, in the mirror no less, felt really strange. It wasn't normal. At least when you're not giving yourself a motivational speech normal. Nothing happened. The longer I stood there, the more uneasy I felt. Standing there, covered in sweat and looking at someone who would normally have smooth makeup on, even on off days. It was unnerving, and a little bit humiliating, considering my sorry state. With a breath, I reluctantly continued. "What time should we meet again?" It took me 2 tries to say that, knowing very well at some point my reflection was to respond, and nothing could have prepared me for that. She smiled, she laughed, she cried. It was a wave of emotions happening all at once. I don't know how else to describe it. It almost looked like she was glitching, and with every glitch showed a different emotion. Every emotion I've probably felt. At some point, she finally settled back to a neutral expression, completely ignoring the mortified look I was giving her. Then she ever so slowly started tilting her head, tilting it to a normal degree, almost as if curious, until it just snapped, an unsettling crunch echoing off the walls as her neck snapped into the most unnatural position, a smile wider and higher than anyone else's cheekbones could ever handle, pupils dilated to the point they were almost too small to see. I screamed, and she was saying something. I don't know what, it was unintelligible, demonic. It sounded nothing like me. I fell to the floor, screaming louder and louder the longer it stared at me, watching my every move, laughing. I backed into the tub, doing something to my ankle that had me screaming for a whole different reason. It continued to laugh at me, and the lights started flickering rapidly. "Shut up! Shut up!" I screamed at it over and over again. "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" I covered my ears. I closed my eyes. I just wanted it to go away. I wanted the thing to leave me alone. It wasn't me, it was a monster. I don't know what it was. It did eventually grow quiet when the lights stopped flickering, my own shameless shrieking being the only thing making any sound in that small restroom. I slowly uncovered my ears, opening my eyes, blurry and sore, and looked back up to the reflection once again, somewhat back to a normal, neutral expression. We stared at one another, and I'm sure I looked much worse by that point than whatever was staring back at me. It was waiting for something, and it wasn't sure until I remembered the final step to the rule. My throat was hoarse, dry, and unforgiving, but I managed to get enough breath to sound out and say it. "Thank you." And just like that, the lights flickered off. It was cold. I was once again alone. I slowly started to get up, realizing the stuff I tossed in the tub was no longer there. My belongings were all gone, and I still don't care where they are. I'm never going back to find out either. Shutting the door to the bathroom, I started limping back over to the bed, shaken and soiled. I felt so heavy, so helpless. Someone started knocking on the front door, the bellboy asking if I liked the meal. I nodded and responded, and whatever I said thankfully worked because he did not come back.